but he did confirm that he was coming, so hopefully he'll pop in.
No worries. Okay, great. We're almost 5 minutes past the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and start. I've just started the recording. Here we go. One more attendee coming. Hello, everybody. My name is Jonah Whitcamper. This is the weekly call of the Amazon Investor Coalition. This is a podcast and call series dedicated to advancing forest-friendly economic development across the Amazon region. We started last year in mid-2020 about. I think this is our 38th call. And this week, we are going to look at ecotourism and the perspective of ecotourism to help advance sustainable development across the Amazon region. And our host this week is Sophia Wood. Sophia, please reintroduce yourself and take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for the intro, Jonah. I'm very excited for this conversation, and we'll have a slightly bigger panel than usual, I guess, on the call. As I mentioned before, for anyone who's joined since, I am Sophia Wood. I'm leading the ecotourism strategy for the Amazon Investor Coalition, alongside my full-time job running a regenerative tour operation called Friends of Wallacea, alongside sister organization Operation Wallacea, which is a UK biodiversity research organization. So today, the conversation is going to be about using ecotourism as a tool to conserve large areas of the Amazon and provide financial support for people who protect these areas, especially but not limited to Indigenous communities. And before we got started, I wanted to quickly define the term ecotourism, because I think it's a term that's become quite controversial over the past decade. What started as a movement to view and protect nature using income from tourism has often been used instead for greenwashing, less than ecological or socially beneficial operations. So for the sake of our conversation today, I wanted to start with a definition to clarify what we're talking about. So ecotourism, as defined by the International Ecotourism Society, is responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment, sustains the well-being of the local people, and involves interpretation and education for locals and foreigners alike. So the idea is to provide direct financial benefits for conservation, recognize the rights and beliefs of Indigenous people, and generate financial benefits for local people. This model has been lauded in Costa Rica and has proven successful in many other important conservation areas, such as the African savanna, the US National Park System, and many others on a smaller scale. Our panel today will seek to provide a temperature check on the possibility of developing large-scale coordinated ecotourism across all Amazon countries, with the idea of promoting cross-border relations, funding protected areas in Indigenous territories, and increasing awareness and interest in preserving the beauty of the Amazon. So I wanted to quickly give a minute to introduce our speakers and then jump straight into the meat of the conversation. So Tiago, would you mind introducing yourself?
No. Hi, Sophia. Hi, Jonah. Hi, everyone. Okay, so I'm Tiago. I'm from Brazil. I've been working for the federal government with protected areas management, and specifically with ecotourism in protected areas for 18 years now. And we've been working a lot with increasing the numbers of visitors in the areas. At the same time, we protect the areas and promote conservation and help the sustainable development of the communities that exist. In the Amazon, we have indigenous communities, but in the protected areas also we have local communities that they are not indigenous, but they are traditional. They have been there for a very long time, rubber tappers, fishermen. So we consider those also important communities for us. At this moment, I'm working to UNDP in a project in Africa, Cabo Verde, but I'm still like helping in the Amazon every time I have the opportunity.
Thanks, Tiago. So we'll move forward to John Bruno. If you could briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll jump into the conversation once everyone's had a chance.
Delighted to. Hello, everyone. As Tiago said, it's an honor to talk to you today. I am the executive director of the International Ecotourism Society. You may remember us from 30 seconds ago when Sophia used our definition, which I think is, I can fairly say, is the most widely used definition of ecotourism. A lot of articles that you'll read will start off with the International Ecotourism Society defines ecotourism as. Our definition is used by the UN and lots of others, major organizations around the globe. So we're a membership organization. We focus on professionals, but we also have students and representatives of every part of the tourism economy, from government officials to journalists, professors, academics, consultants, every part of the industry. So our focus is growing international ecotourism, but since ecotourism is a very local thing, we're lucky to have a wide international network of experts that can operate in specific areas and have expertise with communities in specific countries and in specific regions.
Thanks, John. Gabrielle, would you mind introducing yourself quickly?
Of course. Thank you very much, Sophia, for the invitation. And thank you very much for allowing me to share a little bit about the deep commitment the Nyambu community does in the Amazon rainforest. I actually work for this community in the marketing area and developing business for them. So I'm very excited to let you know a little bit more about what they do and what they have been leading in the rainforest.
Thank you. And Kamarul, I know you quickly introduced yourself before, but would you mind reintroducing yourself for those who didn't hear?
Sure. Well, thanks, Sophia. Again, my name is Kamarul Baksh, and I'm the Deputy Director here at the Guyana Tourism Authority, which is the tourist board for the destination. And I've been heavily involved in destination development, product development, executing training capacity buildings, not only for indigenous communities, but for the industry as a whole, and I've also been leading on destination marketing activities as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know, is Richard Bodmer on the call? I don't think so. I'm wondering if I think his internet is solar panel based, so it usually depends on it being a sunny day. Well, if he pops in, we'll bring him into the call and have him introduce himself. So we have lots to discuss today. It's obviously a huge topic, and we've got representation from countries all across the region. The first question I wanted to get into is just to kind of give a picture of what the major challenges and opportunities are on the ground in the Amazon. It's a massive region. We're talking about, as John was saying, very specific, localized level development of ecotourism. So we know that some of the biggest challenges facing the Amazon ecotourism markets are, fragmentation of the market, lack of infrastructure and capacity for business growth, seasonality of tourism, of being something that people are only coming for certain periods of the year, as well as accessibility, obviously, of the Amazon rainforest being a particularly difficult place to operate the logistics of a tourism business. So in your view, and based on what you've seen, what are the top 3 ways we can fix these structural issues? And if you had a magic wand, where would you put your resources? And this is really directed towards all of you, so I don't know who wants to go first. I'm happy to go in the order that we introduced ourselves.
Well, Sophia, the thing that I think is the most important to the Amazon is access. It's very expensive to visit the Amazon, even for example, for Brazilians, people who live in big cities. So improve accessibility in this broad sense, for me, it would be the most important key factor to improve tourism in the Amazon.
Thank you. Any further thoughts, John?
Sure. To build on what Thiago said, access can go under the realm of infrastructure. So I want to emphasize again that of the, whether you call it 8 or 9 countries that are touching the Amazon region, each one of them has different specific issues. a lot of the Amazon is in Brazil, and a lot of us think of Brazil as kind of an access point, but Ecuador has a very strong, Peru has a very strong, and in Peru access is much easier, for instance, than in Brazil. So but there are each of those areas has specific challenges to infrastructure. So I would say that the major problem is first of all realizing that ecotourism has to grow organically, and it has to grow with the imprimatur of the community, and it has to grow with the voice of the community. And this is a very widely spread voice. So it's difficult to say there's one answer to the Amazon, but if we can take that up one level and say there is an answer, it's that we need more data, we need more information, we need more dialogue with these communities in order to be effective in assisting them, because the desire is there for sure, among these communities. A lot of them are thinking about it, but they have different things that are stopping them from taking those steps.
That's an interesting point you brought up, John, just because I know you've worked with ties creating networks across countries of ecotourism, knowing that each individual business on its own might not have the power to actually bring people in, but bringing them together across a larger network and under a certain umbrella can make them significantly more powerful. Now, I know a lot of the work GTA has been doing is around that, Kemal, so maybe you could speak to creating these networks of ecotourism businesses in the Amazon and how you've been able to invest in creating those networks in Guyana.
Yes, thanks, Sophia. I mean, infrastructure is definitely a big point. But to add something else to the conversation, I believe there's the need to achieve greater levels of alignment with the decision makers in any government. Not sure what the cases are in the other countries, but here locally, I think we should be able to seek a little bit more cognizance of the importance and the impact of tourism really on the ecosystems. But not only from that, but from a holistic standpoint, in terms of national economy development. So basically saying that I think there is a need to have a seat at the economic head table, and I believe that is the first step in charting the solution for us, because oftentimes if ecotourism or anything in relation to the development of ecotourism, I think if it's not recognized as a pillar for national development, then oftentimes it will be pushed back on the back burner. So one, having the buy-in and commitment from the highest levels of government or decision makers at the regional level is very, very important. That's one. And on that note, and I could speak for Destination Guyana, where we were able to, I guess, enshrine this in a policy. It's very important to do this, to develop sort of your blueprint or your model or template that you're working to help develop ecotourism products in and within the Amazon region. Really to have your systems dialed, have your processes dialed, to know exactly what you want to do, because it's very critical to demonstrate that you're able to develop. And I think that goes a far way in convincing the stakeholders that are needed to be convinced, to, I guess, to further the development of this agenda. But yes, within the last few years, we've really taken a developmental agenda to help to develop very sustainable community and non-community tourism enterprises within large, in and within protected areas. So it's an area in which we want to continue development. Guyana, as you know, is positioned as an ecotourism, sustainable, friendly destination, and yeah, we're hoping to continue that good work in the years to come.
Thank you. And I want to come back to that point about channeling government and private investment towards ecotourism, and especially bringing it up with you and Tiago Camarol, because you're coming from this government side of bringing the two sides together. But before we go on to that, I want to give Gabrielle a chance to answer this question about the structural issues on the ground and how to fix them, since you're really in the nitty-gritty day-to-day work right now of working from the Amazon and actually in Yasuni National Park, which has been completely closed off to tourists until about 3 weeks ago.
Okay, thank you very much. So, well, in our case, accessibility is not a big issue. Ecuadorian Amazon rainforest is to say the most accessible one. So, but I would like to go to a more, say, to a wider issue that I would say is very important in order to develop tourism on a correct way. And that's sharing a little bit what just John said. Communication is very, very important. And that's because indigenous communities or non-indigenous communities, but living there in the Amazon rainforest for generations, must be contacted and consulted. What do they want? How they want to develop that development or the objective they have. The key success factor, I would say, for the Anyangu community for its touristic project has been the fact that the own community decided to develop tourism. So it was a question or something they wanted to develop. It was something it was the path they thought it would give answers to their objectives. So they have these assemblies, these community assemblies every now and often, and well, frequently, and that's the space where they take decisions, and that's the space where after some time they decided to bet for tourism. And I would say that that's been the core key success factor for the community to keep working with tourism for these 20 years and with perspectives of keep doing it in the Amazon rainforest. And even many other indigenous communities from Ecuador have come to the Yasuni trying to learn about the experience. But the base of everything was the fact that the indigenous community, or say the Anyangu community, decided to do it. So communication there is very important. And after that, after we have the scenario where the community wants to go through, planning is basic. So training is very, very important. Communities doesn't know necessarily how to manage a project. So they might need training or assistance, but after knowing what the community wants. And after the community have expressed, it's easier to help the community. It's easier to plan the project itself or to direct the efforts through marketing, for example, in order to give to have the tourists in order to fund the project itself and some other things. But the base is having the community to express first.
That's a great point, Gabrielle, and I'll give you a chance to go back to explaining how the Anyangu community really came to that decision and what has been instrumental in the achievement of creating the Napo Wildlife Center. But I want to dig a little bit deeper into the question of how governments can provide support for these communities. We've brought it up a couple of times now that governments might be helpful in providing funding and or training for communities that are starting to get involved in tourism. So this question goes towards Cameron and Tiago, who are obviously coming from the government side of working with ecotourism. And I wanted to ask you if you have any insights or best practices about what has been successful in providing funding for ecotourism development in the Amazon, and in particular with Indigenous communities, although not exclusively. And what can we do, or what can the government do from these areas to make more projects investable, especially for foreign investors that are looking to come in and make a return? Whichever one of you wants to go first.
Yeah, Tiago, you want to go first?
No, Cameron, please.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Sure, no problem. Right. Thanks again, Sophia, for that question. And picking it up from where I left off, the the fact that we have a blueprint for development for ecotourism, sustainable tourism, I think is what lays the groundwork for sustainability. So we have our systems dialed. In 2018, we developed what is known as the blueprint for community-led and owned tourism, because Guyana is known for this type of model in which the community actually owns the lands, and they also own the assets. And the majority of enterprises or businesses within the country is of this model. So that is of significance. And how does government facilitate the development? Well, one, I think it's a high level of collaboration. Tourism inherently needs to be a product of partnerships, and that's one of the things that we have been championing for a long time now. Here at the Guyana Tourism Authority, I mean, we do have a lot of expertise in-house, but you need to have supporting partners. So we have the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, which deals with all of the indigenous peoples and the rights and all the decisions there. We collaborate with other entities like the Ministry of Public Infrastructure that deals with everything infrastructure. So by having a model where we can have effective and sustainable partnerships with sister governmental agencies and non-governmental agencies really help to facilitate the development of enterprises.
Just to pop in on that, Kamrul, I know obviously you and I have worked together specifically on this, so I wanted to ask if you could touch base a little bit on how GTA has worked specifically with private organizations, how you partner with private companies to bring in tourism to the indigenous people in Guyana. And for people who don't know, Guyana is a small country, but over 87% of it is still covered in original virgin Amazon rainforest. And so they're a really strong example of what it looks like to keep the indigenous communities involved in protection, especially using tourism.
Right, Sophia, and that's it, the collaboration there again. So for example, if an indigenous community is shortlisted for development, we would take in the private sector enterprise. So from the tour operators to the outfitters, from the onset really to see whether this product would suit or fit a particular market, obviously. So there's a need again for heavy partnerships. So when we go out to facilitate, whether it's training and capacity building, the Guyana Tourism Authority facilitates this, and then to link them to the markets, we bring in operators. So it's a very inclusive process that we've really defined over a number of years, and it's worked to a very high degree of success. In fact, just last year, we would have launched about 2 indigenous-centric experiences, and this was over the course of 3 to 4 years, which historically the development of indigenous enterprises have been done over 10 to 15 years plus. So I think it's a remarkable achievement of understanding the lessons learned previously from existing enterprises and taking that into consideration for, in the formula that we would have developed.
Thank you. And I know, Tiago, you worked for many, many years in ecotourism development in the Amazon with the Brazilian government. So could you provide some of your insights on how you've been able to channel ecotourism funding into indigenous communities and other communities throughout the Amazon, and maybe how that has translated as well into private partnerships?
Yes, just a small, I would like to add something small to what Kamrul said. In Guyana, I know French Guyana, and we were working with them to try to bring more Europeans to the Amazon, for example, because for two French Guyana flights from France, they are domestic flights. So we are developing strategies to bring people from Machu Picchu and Peru, because it's the most visited destination in the South America, and not just bringing people straight from from United States, for example, but also driving all the strategies to bring people to the entire Amazon. For example, those 2 other options bring people. There are roads that come now from that connect Peru and Brazil, and then we are working together with agencies, tourist companies in Peru to bring some people from the Andes to the Amazon also. In particularly in the situation of Brazil and the local communities, what we have been done with the as government is we understood that most of the projects that were coming to finance ecotourism in the Amazon in our protected areas, they were more on the organizing the community to receive the tourists, but not preparing them to sell their products or to understand supply chain, productivity chain, how it works to put the product on the market. So we have been working with USAID and US Forest Service to help to organize better the communities in the Amazon. We in Brazil, we learned to do ecotourism in the south of Brazil, in the mountains and in the marine areas. And Amazon is very different. We have been studying, for example, Alaska to understand how people go to, why and how they bring people to Denali, to understand how we bring people to the middle of the Amazon. And this is being very helpful. We are understanding that we need to work in Brazil Amazon, at least with the water. Water is the most important resource, and how to move people in the Amazon is easier. So we've been working with understanding how, when we use lodges and when we use cruises to bring people to travel through a protected area like Anavilhanas that is close to the Manaus, and then we can go up the river, the Amazon River, and visit very nice places, and you have a place to stay. And other options, one thing that is really important that we are doing as government is regulating ecotourism. So now we have different regulations for public-private partnerships. And this is really important. Now we have options for a community. If the community has the capacity to organize the entire tourism operation, they can do that. But if they can only, but if the international company, for example, or a company from another place in Brazil wants to operate, for example, sports fishing in the Amazon, they can do different contracts with the community, depending on how the community is prepared to receive tourism, different arrangements so we can start the operation. And then with time, the community can understand better the entire process and take control, better control of the process. And what we've been learning in the Amazon is that we don't need millions of tourists like Rio de Janeiro or Foz do Iguaçu in Brazil. We need good amount of tourists that are willing to spend more money. And then so we are investing in, for example, bird watching, sports fishing, that tourists are willing to have a more difficult logistic to access the places, but they are willing to go to very far, remote, even more remote places in the Amazon to get the fish they want or to see the bird they want. So this is the kind of the segments that we are working more now. So we are working with regulations and specific segments that are more willing to have more difficult logistics to visit the places.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It looks like John would like to add on to that point, so please go ahead.
I just, first of all, to sum up what Gabriel said, some fantastic stuff. He took the words right out of my brain, and a lot of you have great speakers here today. So, but to build on what Thiago just said, two very, very important things I think jump out at me from our experience in every country. One, he said that a lot of, and I have to be somewhat verbose about this, so I apologize. if you imagine that there is this large global capacity, right, for receiving tourists, that system is overcrowded because we aren't adding to it rapidly enough. And these places have enormous amounts of potential capacity to add to that. And using eco-travelers to add in another of Thiago's points, who are careful, who spend more money, who don't require fancy infrastructure, who actually want an authentic experience. They're the best ones to come in and allow there to be revenue so that this revenue can be reinvested in potentially having other tourists if those tourists are wanted, right? So how to get there is we have to allow these people into the global financial system. And right now that simply doesn't exist. So if governments can say, and Kamarul actually laid this out, if governments can say, here is a path for an ecotourism community that has ecotourism assets, to allow those assets to be seen by the global community, to be booked, or as Thiago said, to even be gotten to, then they have a chance to achieve that revenue. If not, then there may be the desire, but what we've seen so many times is communities will say, well, how do we get to that next step? How do we get the travelers here? How do we know what they'll want? All of these things. There's a fairly standard set of answers to that. It doesn't require much money. It doesn't require anything really, but as Gabriel said, communication. So we need to be able to take these lessons and say to this massive amount of untapped capacity in the Amazon region, here are some simple steps you can take to allow your assets to be visible if you would like tourists. That way you can control the number and the type of tourists that come to your community. You can control the revenue and you can manage your own growth in your own way. Without giving them the tools to do that, we're locking out a lot of potential ecotourism, and we're also we're not giving them a fine enough brain so that they can make their own choices, which is, I think, as all the panelists have said, the most important thing here.
That's a fantastic point, John. And I actually, you kind of, read my mind about where I wanted to go next. So I appreciate it. And I actually wanted to bring in Gabrielle and give you a chance to talk about, since you've been, you are running the marketing for one of these businesses on the ground and know what that looks like to work with an Indigenous community that's getting started and then is now quite successful. I mean, the Napa Wildlife Center has won dozens of international awards for conservation and for the quality of the product that they have. And this is still completely built for and by the Anyangu Quechua community. So could you explain how the community made the decision to go down the ecotourism route? And is there anything you wish you'd known before you started? What tools or programs have been instrumental to the success of the community? And then addressing kind of the last point that John was talking about, what are you still missing to be able to achieve what you'd like to achieve with this project?
Okay, thank you. So, well, pretty much there were a couple of things there on why the Anyangu decided to take the touristic path. First of all, they were leaving their land. So they were looking for jobs, to have income for their families. Because even though they live in the rainforest, like they've been doing by generations, there are some other needs that modern life has created, right? And they are not far from that. So they were looking for jobs, they were leaving the land, they were abandoning the families in some cases. There was no school or high school in the community, there was no healthcare center. So they realized that their ancestral land was being abandoned and probably on the hands of petroleum companies, logging companies. So pretty much they had a couple of these assemblies, and these assemblies are very interesting because that's how things were done before in the past, in the old times. So every single person, every single member of the community has a say and has a vote as well. And there they just found that tourism would be a way to have income, to protect the land, and as a way to and because they were having this income, a way to reinvest, trying to solve their social needs, right? And I think if they would say if they would hope to know something before they started, I think it was actually training, training on how to manage an organization. They went through very complicated moments when they just started. They got the assistance of an international NGO, and eventually they had differences on the way the project was being managed. So they had to ask the local government, the local national government, to help the community to regain the management of their project. And eventually, well, they are managing the two projects. They have two projects now, small projects, and probably they would hope to know a little bit more about management and treating with tourism as well, with the visitors, I mean.
And Gabriel, is the Napa Wildlife Center able to be a registered business in Ecuador with a bank account and everything associated with that? Because we've often seen that these communities run very informally and are not able to get access to these kinds of tools. So are you able to access bank accounts, internet, all of these infrastructure issues that a lot of communities face?
Okay, yeah. Actually, the Anyangu community has every requirement that the local government has to participate as a community tourism organization legally. And the key success factor there was that the community, because they has this democratic way of living, because they decided to go for tourism. They decided to get help as well. So once they regained the management of their project, they hired local people to help them. So they hired someone to be the advisor on management, some other people to be advisors on accounting and finance, on the legal side as well. And all these people help the community, as I'm doing now with the business development, in different subjects, so the community could reach the goals they had. And one very important thing there was that they have this gathering, these meetings, these assemblies every month. So the general manager, who is a member of the community, lead the assembly with some of the core leaders of the finance side, the legal side, in order to see how the project is working, right? So if they would like to know a little bit more about any issue, they can ask for it. And that has been a very important part of why the Anyangu people has been so successful there, right?
What a great point about bringing in an outside advisor. We've often seen in the industry communities trying very hard to do this on their own, which can be very commendable, but at the same time leaves them locked out of resources that governments, organizations like Guyana Tourism Authority, and anything else might be able to provide. So bringing in outside advisors that are aligned in terms of values can be really helpful. I want to shift this over to looking at the size of the potential ecotourism market in the Amazon. We've kind of flirted with this idea. It's a huge area that's relatively underinvested in terms of ecotourism, and the fact that many of the communities that work in ecotourism, as John brought up, and as we've seen in some of the projects in Guyana, require very few tourists to be financially sustainable for the community. And so it's an area where spreading horizontally rather than vertically can be really effective in protecting larger areas of the Amazon. So I want to turn to John, since you have this perspective of the global ecotourism industry as a whole, and ask what opportunities you see for growth and investment across the Amazon region, and actually, what is missing from the region to help this become a $1 billion industry, if you think it can head towards that. And if it's capital, what should investors be looking for? How can they help?
So if I'm going to tie in, if you don't mind, that's a big answer. So I hope everyone is prepared for me to talk for a few minutes. Gabrielle, I have to, I just have to commend you on your thoughts and your work. But to build on what was just said, the idea is, if you're getting somebody who's helping communities and transferring this vital knowledge to them, we asked about investment. Investment as a mechanism is also kind of requires infrastructure, and so I'm sure everyone on this call will tell me there are difficulties with getting investment down to these communities in the right way. So we look for two types of things. We look for ways to invest without necessarily moving capital around, right? And actual expert advice and people who can go and assist communities. Most importantly, and I can't quote this enough, I can't underline it enough, to do what they want to do, to accomplish the goals that they have decided to accomplish. Not to, so often in the business of aid, it's a monologue. We're kind of telling, and all of us, if we go, all of us, I'm sure have dealt a lot with the UN and other folks. I mean, I understand this group is under the auspices of UN 75. I get told a lot, well, we have this 20,000 foot view, and a lot of the folks that I've discussed with. But really, this is done at the local level, and the motivation for it must come from within these communities. So our job is to facilitate their movement in the direction that they want to go, right? Not to influence that direction, but to allow that direction. So some of the first types of investment that can take place is experts doing exactly what Gabrielle is doing, which is going literally to these communities, not being in I mean, I'm not trying to be pejorative in any way, but unless you've actually gone and been a part of these communities, you're not going to have quite the perspective that you might need to make sure that the revenue gets to the right places and the services get to the right places and that people are doing what needs to be done. So there just isn't any overall consistent method to finance that. If I have right now, and I have tons of young people with some expertise and people mid-career with some expertise who would love to assist Gabrielle or apprentice to him, or would love to do these kinds of projects on their own, but they have no idea where to go, no idea where to who to talk to. So there is no network of that kind of funding right now. It's very fragmented. It's the governments don't necessarily cooperate. And Kamrul, I really, Giaco, I have a lot of great respect for your governments and the work they do, but I could just advocate for slightly more hand-holding, as we see in some of the treaties that have gone on, some of the signers to the desire to protect the Amazon. So and I want to, it's fortunate that that Art Krebs is on the call. Art, are you still on? Let's see if he's on.
I'm here.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. So I happen to know Art personally for a while, and Art is from the other side. He's the private sector, and is one of the few people in the world who's worked on 100 million USD plus projects in sustainable development. There aren't that many of those. So, there's only a few people who have that kind of experience. And I don't want to quote you, Art, I'm reluctant to quote you, but, working with governments, and communities, there is sometimes, and I want to put this the right way, a tiny bit of a disconnect between what the governments want to accomplish and what the communities want to accomplish. So, Art, I want to be very sure that, when I advocate for communities to have access and expertise, that I don't quote you incorrectly, and your experience says that when you're dealing with specifically when you're dealing with governments and the challenges of individual operators, the main thing that they need is to be allowed to facilitate their direction. And what are you seeing in terms of how that operates at the local level with the projects that you have?
Yeah. So first of all, let me try to provide some feedback from outside the box. And please don't take this wrong for those that are working for the government, but the circumstances are very unique in every single situation. So in my experience, unfortunately, in some cases when dealing with the government, everything starts becoming more into a process or a mechanism that takes a long time. And at the end of the day, when everything is set and ready to go, the funding comes in, and then the funding doesn't reach the end point at the certain level that is needed. So I believe that there is a need in order to utilize the right mechanism that will allow that funding to reach the right end goal and be able to create that progress that's needed. In addition to that, I think that government is essential, of course, but the approach, and I totally agree with everybody as point of view, that it has to be more of a consultative approach to the local people, because at the end of the day, they are the experts. They know exactly what is that they need, what are their important areas of improvement, their lacks of things that are not there, infrastructure to be precise in certain situations. So, if you don't get the buy-in from the local people and you go the reverse of trying to approach it from the higher levels of governance, and then you get to the local people and the local people, reject the idea because they never got involved, then we have a complete collusion. And that's really what I think that, I'm so happy to hear, for example, Gabriel was talking about this and Tiago as well, that they need to be approached, and they need, in my mind, they should be approached first. Because if they are not buying into getting some additional help and they don't understand what that help will bring to them, then it collapses, going in reverse. And that's one of the points. I think, secondly, the mechanism of allowing the appropriate allocation of the funds to the right points is essential, because otherwise there's a lot of resources and time being wasted when at the end of the day, the vision or whatever was needed doesn't get accomplished.
Right.
There's rarely the situation in where, Carmelo was telling us that, in his situation, it worked great, which is awesome, but it's not necessarily the same everywhere else.
Right. And that's so that's like a flashback within a flashback for a panelist to ask a question of somebody else. But I was going to quote him, and I didn't want to since he's here on the call.
Thanks.
So that I hope that answers the question, and I'm
yes,
delighted
well, I
to elaborate.
wanted to be conscious of time and ask one final question before I know Jonah asked a question, which is funny, Jonah, because John and I have been talking about just exactly that system since we first talked. So I think there is a need for that. I wanted to just wrap up and give, finally address what I feel is the elephant in the room, which is the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on ecotourism, and specifically in the Amazon. As we all know, COVID-19 has trashed the tourism industry, just to put it unlightly. It's led many ecotourism practitioners to question whether tourism can be an effective strategy for long-term protection of biodiversity hotspots because of the industry's vulnerability to global shocks like this one. So I wanted to ask you, do you believe tourism is still an effective strategy to help us protect large swaths of the Amazon? And if so, what can we do right now from either the government or the private sector to ensure that these businesses don't shutter permanently as a result of the pandemic that's put a lot of them on their last legs? I don't know, Tiago, if you want to go first.
Hi, Sophia, thanks. It's a very easy question to answer. I just want to point for the perspective of government that as government we are learning that we have to move away from we decentralize the what we are doing. So we are giving more power to protected area managers to and the communities to organize themselves with the tourism sector, allowing them, because the communities, they know what they need better than us. So we are developing this understanding in Brazil that we need to let them build the connections and get in contact with the marketing and the tourism sector to decide how they want to move forward. We related to, we are also working, I am working with other countries in Brazil, in the Amazon. We have a international group financed by FAO. It's called Head Parkers, and we have a group of in tourism, and we are building capacity with protected area managers all over the Amazon to help them understand how to manage better the tourism in different protected areas. And another point that I want to point is that we need, in Brazil, we need more tourism in the Amazon, even though it's not authentic and 100% ecotourism is even mass tourism, or not mass tourism, but different options of tourism are better than what's happening in the Amazon. The ways of people are living the Amazon right now, many ways. So we understand that tourism is really important. COVID, I say that COVID sucks because into 2019, we had almost 500,000 visitors in Amazon protected areas in Brazil. So we are really happy that we are organizing better than the protected areas were receiving more tourists. Local tourists were coming in from different states in the Amazon, and from other places from Brazil and other countries were coming. And COVID, what I understand, that COVID just showed how important tourism and ecotourism are for the protected areas conservation. Instead of, I see people saying that COVID showed how fragile is tourism for the conservation. But my point of view is that COVID showed how important is tourism, ecotourism, for the conservation of the areas. This is the most important ecosystem service, or the more effective ecosystem service that protected areas are offering to the society right now. So we need to help sustain tourism in this difficult moment, so the communities and the tourism operators can cross this moment and continue developing. And just to finish,
yeah, go ahead.
We understand that the local communities, they should not live just from tourism. Tourism should be one of the way of their living, is because of the seasonality and things like COVID, so they can continue living their lives even if situations like this one happen.
Thank you so much, Tiago. I'm just conscious of time because I know everyone will have to hop off in about 2 minutes, and I want to make sure Jonah has a chance to answer his question. Well, I guess, yeah, I'd love everyone to have a chance to answer this question about COVID, but I want Jonah to have a chance to ask his question before everybody hops off. So do you want to ask your question, Jonah?
It's okay, go at the end.
Okay.
And I can go over.
Sure, okay, got it. Gabrielle, would you like to address this? I know obviously Anyangu has done a great job investing in other things because of tourism.
Well, I'll try to be brief. First, I do agree with Tiago, and I think that this pandemic has shown how important tourism is for the indigenous communities, and particularly to the communities in the Amazon rainforest. And just sharing the Anyangu experience there, long ago in one of the community assemblies, the Anyangu people decided to create a savings fund. in order to reinvest in the school, the high school, the healthcare center, to improve the buildings, to do maintenance to the projects. And well, that savings fund is helping them, help the community basically this very complicated 2020. And that provision that that idea that the community, that decision that the community had long ago, because they wanted to do it, because they decided to, just save the projects for almost a year.
Thank you. And Kamrul, I guess, could you quickly address how GTA has helped the small ecotourism businesses in Guyana survive this period?
Yes, I mean, there's no easy fix to this, obviously. Tourism has been disproportionately affected from COVID-19, must say that. But what we've done is facilitation again. We've led a number of hygiene and sanitation trainings. So basically equipping our stakeholders, so whether they're indigenous communities, whether they're private sector operators, to be in a state of readiness, to host travelers when it's obviously safe to do so, and obviously given a lot of interventions, so COVID-19 supplies and kits, so that one, they have the tools readily available to host again, and obviously to develop standard operating procedures, so everything from guiding to transport to lodge management and everything in between that. So a lot of facilitation during this time. It's a lot of guidance is needed, and yeah, that's one of the ways that we would have facilitated it.
Thank you. And I know, for example, in Mexico, they've been able to vaccinate lots of people in the tourism industry to get it restarted. So hopefully we'll see that in other countries as well.
So may I interject for 1 second, Sophia? Things are looking a little bit more positive in the tourism industry. Right now, although COVID continues to be an upside down cycle, financing is becoming more available. So that's a good sight into what is coming in the future. So I just wanted to mention that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and to Art's point, yeah, we've really capitalized on some funding opportunities available for our partners. We did some proposals for quite a few of the indigenous communities, just security funding and help them with their conservation efforts, because tourism does play a major or the major role in their conservation programs. And yeah, the more that we can secure funding, whether that is internally or externally, we will continue to do so.
Well, thank you very much to all of the panelists for your kind and insightful conversation about this issue. I know we're at the top of the hour, so I will let Jonah take over in terms of moving forward with water cooler time. I'm able to stick around. I don't know if any of the other panelists are able to stick around to continue the conversation with anyone who has follow-up questions. Thank you so much for everyone who participated and joined us today.
Thank you, Sophia. This is the moment where we move into unstructured time. I encourage everybody to put their email addresses into the chat so that we can follow up with each other afterwards. I see a couple names that are new. It'd be great to be in touch so we can invite you to future calls. Thanks so much to all the panelists and Sophia. I think this is going to be a popular episode when the podcast comes out. Lots of people want to help.
Yay. I wanted you to ask your question, Jonah, because John and I have been talking about this basically since our first conversation when you put us in touch to start talking about this conversation. So I wanted you to, I guess, ask the panelists. I don't know that this exists. We think it should.
So there's a question for all the panelists. So if I'm a tourist and I want to go to Peru and I want to visit the Amazon while I'm there, I might type into Google Peruvian Amazon tourist destinations or something like that. And I'll get, something kind of random. But my guess is that someone who's got a lot of experience could create a site, to all of the great ecotourism destinations for Peru or for the entire Amazon. Does such a site exist for Peru, for any other country? Does it exist for the whole region? And if it doesn't, well, gosh, let's create it. What does exist?
Okay.
Art, how excited are you to take that question? Jonah, we've been having meetings like once every 2 weeks to talk about this between John and Art and I. So so glad you arrived at that too.
Yes, John, I think that is a great opportunity, and you hit it right on the head, because at the end of the day, it's something that we've been really focusing in, and we got, you know, multiple solutions that are pretty much in the development phase, including a mechanism on the availability of ensuring there is governance and monitoring and execution on allocation of funding.
So Jonah, to answer, first of all, the real problem lies in the fact that there are at least 50,000 assets in the Amazon region that are almost unknown. So the model of going to a place, being there, and finding out from someone that certain assets are available is the only way that these places are on the map. They're not bookable. They're not even findable in many cases to the international community. And a lot of the folks that do sort of client-facing work at that level are part-timers who would love to be full-timers if they could, but and that's not unique to the Amazon. That happens right here in the U.S. I mean, there's a lot of people like that are sort of part-time tour guides that would do more if they could, or part-time areas that are visitable, and you know, people will open them up for tourists if they're there. So you know, the question is to how, if those were made available, if those were made bookable on a trustable platform, then you would see, as Thiago advocated for, a massive pickup in business, but one that's, again, controllable by the community. So they can say, we want this much, we want that much, and control that access and that ingress into their community. But that is that would be, and it, tragically, to answer your question, no, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't even exist on a country level. In fact, lots of the countries, and I won't name them specifically, don't actually have an inventory of what their assets are. That again, that's not in any way unique to the Amazon region or South America. That's every continent has that issue. So one of the first things to do would be to actually inventory those assets, find out where they are in terms of their readiness for tourism, what their appetite is for increased tourism, and then take the ones that are ready for tourism, place them in a system where they can be seen and be booked. And what we know is that within 36 months, they'll have a steady stream of revenue coming to them from eco travelers and intrepid, you know, eco travelers, but also as time goes by, more of the, I guess, what we would call the mainstream travelers. So that needs to happen. That very much needs to happen. It's funny that you immediately saw that. I guess that's something that is kind of becoming obvious.
Obvious as we had the conversation. I mean, we have written up a two-pager of what this could look like, of what is needed to make that happen. Well, what the basic level investments are and infrastructure is to make that happen, down from, you know, marketing and you know, training, as well as, I think, payments infrastructure is a major part of it, marketing infrastructure, call center, and booking. And that's actually part of why I was so excited to have Gabrielle on the call, because the Napa Wildlife Center is one of few places that actually has an online booking system, has an online presence, has a digital footprint, and can speak to what that looks like. But it still remains, you know, part of a very fragmented market. Even in Ecuador, you have maybe 7 eco lodges in the Amazon. They're not all on one platform where you could find them all at the same time.
Exactly right.
Well, you cannot find all the projects online, but there are quite some travel agencies and touristic operators that are actually more into the community tourism, right? So they are experts in community tourism, ethnotourism, Travolution, Comu Travel, and some other agencies. and you might probably find different community projects on their websites. But additionally, in Ecuador, there's an association of community tourism as well. I was trying to see if they have a web page. Unfortunately, they only have a Facebook page. I'm gonna copy it for you. And they do have all the community tourism organizations here in Ecuador, legally established, and some other that are looking to become legally, to work legally, right? So there is this idea as well, but it's very local, a very local thing, and they might work trying to coordinate some things with national government, but not necessarily to show the projects, at least yet, right? So that might be a second stage for the Ecuadorian Association, but it's a very interesting. It would be very interesting if there's something like more wider, more I don't know, regional or even bigger. So people who is looking to do a different tourism might find easily different projects around the world where their money is going to be invested on the best way, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, Gabrielle, as well, because, you know, there was an effort about 15 years ago to unite ecotourism across Brazil and across a couple of other areas called Pro Ecotour. And it probably might, you know, one hypothesis for why that isn't as active now might be just because of the internet age that we have now, with the timing that we have today of access to platforms, of the ability to build them and people's use of them, how used we are to, you know, reaching out to places in the middle of nowhere on the internet, might mean that we are in a better time today, better than, you know, 20 years ago, to actually build something where a platform can represent the whole Amazon, and an Airbnb for the Amazon type thing. I see Richard was able to join us. I think we might have had a slight timing snafu based on the changing time zones constantly. I know we've had the UK change and the US change differently. So I just wanted to give, since we're here, wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself and mention a little bit of the work that you're doing in Peru and our Can you, Richard?
Yes. First of all, it has nothing to do with the time change. It has to do with internet problems I currently have it. The internet went out, and I finally rebooted it. So first of all, let me apologize for that, and let me apologize in case you lose me, because it's still very unstable. It's saying that right in front of my face right now. Your network is unstable. Oh, sorry. So I'm Richard Bodma. I work in the Peruvian Amazon, and I've worked also in other parts of the Amazon. I was in Belém do Pará for some time, and I'm part of a foundation called Fund Amazonia, and we have different types of tourism and ecotourism and educational and research activities under that umbrella.
Thank you. And Richard, you are on a boat outside of Iquitos right now, am I right?
Yes, and that's one reason for these internet issues. When it rains, I lose it, and it was raining, but now it's sunny, so let's hope it stays sunny for a little bit.
Well, most of us have worked in the Amazon, so we are empathetic towards the sporadic internet access in that region, which I guess speaks very well to our point about the lack of infrastructure.
Yeah, it's actually a battery problem. The communications tower has a solar system to it, and the batteries are dead, and they haven't replaced them. So it only works when there's actually sun and there's enough to get those batteries enough to give you internet. So it's actually a problem of maintaining infrastructure in that case.
That's a good point. Well, there's another person still here who I wanted to bring up in case you are connected. Jim, was part of some of the conversations I had while we were setting things up, and is working with the Center for Protected Areas Management and has been doing a lot of management of protected areas in Latin America. I don't know if you're here, Jim, to introduce yourself since we're here. We'd love to hear from you.
Hi there, and I see my former colleagues from WCS, Richard Bobmer, colleagues Tiago, Ana, Madeiros, Rodrigo from Brazil that I've had a chance to work with. A pleasure to see you all online. And thanks, Sophia, for the invitation. And sorry, I had to get on a little bit late.
No, we're pleased to have you here, and it seems like it's a small world in Amazon ecotourism development, if you know half the people on the call already. Could you maybe just mention a little bit of your background and the work that you've done in the region, Jim? That would be great.
Sure. As I mentioned already, I spent much of my career working for the Bingos, the big international NGOs, a long time at WCS, working in Latin America, also with CI and WWF earlier in my career. And I continue to collaborate with all those organizations on capacity building activities. And for the last 12 years, I've been at Colorado State University, which has a long tradition of working in protected area management, actually over a century, and over the last 3 decades in Latin America. And we do a lot of short courses and capacity building together with NGOs, together with bilateral, multilateral agencies. And in the past 7 years, we've worked a lot with Tiago and his colleagues at Isimi Bio on a specific initiative regarding promoting community-based ecotourism in the Brazilian Amazon.
Thank you. And thanks so much for joining the call. Appreciate having you here. Jonah, I saw you unmute yourself a couple of times. I'm not sure if I cut you off on something.
No, I just love to know about the resources that already are used. You mentioned Airbnb for the Amazon. I'm sure there are some Airbnb sites, that are listed in the Amazon. So what are the primary internet pathways that people use to date to get to the region?
I'm not sure if anyone else wants to speak on that. I personally, actually yesterday was looking at the Airbnb availability in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and it's quite limited to areas outside of Tena, which is not the most beautiful of cities, but it is in the Amazon. So it's pretty limited as far as I've seen on something like Airbnb, and a lot of what I've seen is, each and every company having their own website, and then their ability to actually do any SEO and web development, have a marketing person like Gabrielle working with them. The communities I've worked with generally don't have any or much marketing capacity. And I know obviously through my personal work with the Guyana Tourism Authority that they're working really hard to get all of their investable villages connected to international operators so that they make it onto a platform, but they're not everybody's necessarily ending up on the same platform.
I might be able to shed some light on that and answer your question and build on what Sophia just said. So I've had good conversations with Expedia and Booking.com, and Booking.com is just now starting to get into the world of sustainable travel. All of them are really, so they're just entering. The problem lies in the fact that almost all travel assets today that are booked internationally come from one of 29 what are called aggregators, which take assets and package them for the large travel sites. So the A-list sites, like the ones we all know here, Airbnb, and Airbnb has their own inventory, but they still package them. So if you go to, what is the one, HomeKey, there's Vrbo, there's a couple of others, you'll see a lot of the same assets. And a mid-sized one that, like Marriott's PlacePass, for instance, all of their assets come from these aggregators. They don't build their own inventory themselves. So for an asset to list itself in the international market, it has to go to a specific site, either through the Expedia's program or one of the others, and has to fit itself into a certain set of data that they can then turn around and sell. And it has to go through specific agreements, specific financial capabilities, and a review process that's arcane, difficult, and almost like an IRS tax form. So the IRS for internationals being the American tax agency. So to make a long story short, there's a initiative at Expedia to try and reach out to sustainable assets and to try and onboard small community assets, but they're just beginning that, and they're only beginning to talk to people who have that expertise about how to do it. So there are a couple of providers that are addressing that problem by allowing small assets to pipeline into these large booking sites. But as Sophia said earlier, and as Daniel said, it's mostly local and very, very fragmented. So there's certainly no way that you could say, well, here is the capacity for the world, or here is the capacity for any specific region. Some nations, Iceland has a very good system for this, but I would say that the nations that have that, you can count on one hand. And even in those nations, there's a very, there's a serious process. Now, of course, Iceland, that's a small place and very tourism centric, and they have a very mature model. But to give you an example, a lot of Ecuador is a perfect example, since we all have familiarity. As I've said before, and as Daniel just said, half of the assets are not functionally registered. They're not known to the government per se, right? There's no SQL query that you can run and get these assets to come up. So it relies on making the process available to those in those communities so that they can add themselves to the global booking capacity. And that's we're quite far from that. That bridge is unbuilt right now.
This seems like a great opportunity to, I mean, it doesn't take a lot of work for someone in some corner of the world to do a lot of mapping and to create a more comprehensive list than is already visible.
Right.
And that'll attract a lot of investors.
Some of what John and Art and I have started working on. I know Art's has a lot of the back end infrastructure already at his fingertips because of the development he's done to other places. And no, he didn't bring it up, but our first conversation when we talked the first time was about the work he's been doing with 6th Sense, and some of which has been in the Amazon. And so I know, starting to create that map might be part of, starting to create this article for the ecotourism strategy and what we can do as the Amazon Investor Coalition to help bring together those companies, even if it's just first a list on the internet, even if it starts as an Excel document and becomes a platform, starting to put those lists together, I think would be incredibly helpful.
Art, can you walk us through a little bit about the financing of the ecotourism industry? How much of it is it debt? How much of it is equity? How much of it is about infrastructure builds versus just bringing marketing to those who need it?
Well, it all depends on the different circumstances, of course. I would say that if we're looking at the Amazon, as we heard before, some of the infrastructure is already there. I think in the case of Richard's comment, I know that for example, the communications in Peru were very heavily invested as far as internet and towers all over the country. But the problem comes down into the maintenance. Like you say, the batteries don't work, but the system is there. And that happens throughout I've been to locations in the Andes that you would never believe that there's signal, and they have pretty good signal. So it's all a variable, I would say, conglomerate of different percentages of allocations, if you want to put it in that way. But at the end of the day, if I understand your question correctly, what is a typical allocation of, let's say, for example, the equity and infrastructure? It all depends also on the ownership, because at the end of the day, private investments with government could be one, But then if somebody is owing a reserve of, let's say, 1,000 hectares in the middle of the Amazon, then you're dealing with a different perspective where there is equity already in place. And the funding is relative to what you want to be developing. The infrastructure might be there, the infrastructure might not be there. So then it's a very fluid circumstance. And it really needs to be looked at individually. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, one question I'd had for Richard and Tiago, and since you're both here now, I thought I'd ask, which takes us a little away from the investment side, is just talking about infrastructure a little bit more and access, the role of Amazon cities like Iquitos and Manaus that are accessible by plane, because they are hubs where people can get to relatively easily compared to other areas of the Amazon. What are the role that these cities play in getting people deeper into the Amazon, and how could they be more effective in channeling tourism into the Amazon as these major international hubs where people can easily access?
Well, I can say.
Oh, please go ahead.
No, please, Richard, you have the. Go first, please.
Yeah, in case your internet.
Okay. Yeah. So, I think that these cities, well, let me just speak specifically of Iquitos. Okay. Iquitos has some major issues to it in terms of the pollution it has, noise pollution and air pollution, in terms of the city is not what you would call a sustainable city. And I think that's part of where these cities need to change. While there might be a hub to come into, the city itself has a lot that it can do. And we've been involved in some of those projects. One is the cultural and historic tourism. We have two museums there, the Indigenous Cultures Museum, the Historic Boat Museum, and we run a hotel, which is a historic monument. And so, you know, part of it is to bring some life into the city, not only have it as a hub and don't care about the city, and well, the people don't like it when they go there because of, and all the rickshaws. And so electric rickshaw is a kind of the perfect size for an electric vehicle. It was a golf cart, been developed a long time. And things like that, changing the city into a more sustainable city needs to be done in the future. Otherwise, it's never going to work as a hub. People don't want to go to that type of mess, unsustainable. And so I think that's where a lot of our effort has gone into in the city, is to be able to have some of the first museums there that function and things like that. And we've redone a few plazas in the traditional way. And until that happens, until the city actually changes, it's always worked as a hub, but it's not going to work as a good hub until Iquitos itself becomes a destination that people want to go to, not because of the chaotic. In the tourism world, you say vibrant, right? When you read vibrant, you know, that's going to be a chaotic city. And that, I think, is one of the main points.
Thank you. I know, Tiago, you jumped in to talk a little bit more about
I want to add that it's important to have those hub cities. In Brazil, we should have more international airports in other states in the Amazon, so people can fly through those different areas. And we need different types of tourism and other business that need to use those flights, because the thing is, just few people, just few tourists, to build infrastructure in those big cities, it's not economically sustainable. We need some things going on, and those cities should be more sustainable, environmental sustainable, but we need those large hubs and big cities in some areas and international flights, so we can create opportunities for the communities for more real ecotourism. But if we don't have a minimal infrastructure that this big business generate, then it's much difficult to bring the tourists to the remote areas and to genuine opportunities for community-based tourism and ecotourism.
I think it's so interesting that you bring that up, Tiago, and the point that you brought up earlier about the importance of rivers and water travel to Amazon ecotourism. Because if you look at the example of, the African savanna and access to game parks in Africa, a lot of that is done through small bush planes and boats and less traditional transport, I guess, not cars, basically, and not big planes. So it'd be interesting to consider how these smaller bits of infrastructure could be used and scaled up in the Amazon as they've been able to do in African safaris. I wonder what we can adopt from the success of the African safari model for the Amazon.
One thing that is important in this subject, we realized that sports fishing, despite it's not being ecotourism as per se that everyone understands, but we saw for conservation, if the community instead of taking the entire fish and selling to a cheaper place in the city, if they work with sports fishing, it's more they have more income to their area, and many of those visitors they are willing to go to Manaus, for example, and they take another flight to a smaller airport in the Amazon, and they take an hydro airplane and then go and then land in a river to be in a very remote area. And we are understanding now that, for example, the same way that photography safaris are the Amazon, fishing is Amazon is for fishing, what safari is for Africa.
And what we found here in the Peruvian Amazon, I would say, unfortunately, is that the ayahuasca tourism is probably bigger than the ecotourism. I put ecotourism in the category of sustainable tourism. I kind of make three categories: sustainable tourism, neutral tourism, and harmful tourism. Neutral tourism might be a hotel taking tourists, but really isn't involved in anything sustainable. It could be if they had sustainable energy, for example, then they move over more to sustainable, and ecotourism is over very much on the sustainable. Then you have the ayahuasca. I put the ayahuasca in, I've seen the damage it's done, not only people, but it does a lot of damage, but it's very big here. And that's one of the things that we see in our hotel. We have people who go on ayahuasca tours, but they're not allowed to take in the hotel. That's completely prohibited, as in all of our infrastructure. So what we have here in the Amazon also in terms of that is we have this type of tourism, which is not a very pleasant tourism, that's dominating the tourist landscape here. And that's something the government has tried to regulate. I find it very difficult to do that because they're in that same conflict. Well, we regulate this and put restrictions on it, then we don't get the tourists to come here. And they're the major tourists to come in large numbers. It's an illegal drug in most other countries, except here, and I think Colombia, Ecuador also have ayahuasca tourism.
I'm glad you brought that up, Richard, because it's something that we've talked about a lot at some of the Amazon Investor Coalition meetings. And obviously ayahuasca is a huge part of the tourism industry in the Amazon. I don't know if Teddy's around, but Teddy has been on some calls with me about ayahuasca tourism, specifically in the Peruvian Amazon. and ways to make it more sustainable. So it's very interesting to hear your perspective on that. And I don't know how big it is in Brazil, or if you have any insights, Tiago, about ayahuasca in Brazil. Maybe not.
In Brazil, we are having some in Acre. Acre is growing in ayahuasca tourism. The many indigenous communities now are creating festivals and bringing tourists to have this experience with ayahuasca. Also, some rubber tapper communities are producing and bringing tourists to participate in those rituals. It's not so big as in Peru. Peru is the hub for this kind of tourism, but Acre is growing. I think that it should be regulated, as Richard said. If you make it more sustainable, and it could be organized in a way that won't be harmful and can also help to organize the culture and not organize, fortify on the some local cultures and people learning and learning to respect the Amazon through those different access to learning with the culture, with those indigenous communities.
Yeah, that's really important. I don't know what it looks like specifically in Peru, but I do know one of the major challenges with ayahuasca tourism has been the disenfranchisement of indigenous communities. And it is certainly something that is worth talking about further as we're talking about ecotourism, to make decisions, I guess, about what it looks like to be involved with those businesses.
Yeah, ayahuasca businesses will never grow. The reason for that is because the US has it listed as Class A drug, which means that the companies can't get bank accounts and banks that work with the US, and all banks work with the US. I've seen so many people come down and try to grow an ayahuasca business, and it all collapses for the same reason. They have to do everything outside the banks. And of course, you can't run a bigger business outside the banks so informally. So that, I don't think, is, until it's regulated and agreed upon internationally, the US isn't going to allow this to grow.
That's a great point. I will have to run in a few minutes to another call. I appreciate everyone being here, and if anyone wants to make any last points or bring up any questions for further conversation, happy to field them now.
I just want to say it's a great honor to talk to everyone here. It's amazing to participate in a conversation with so much knowledge and experience. And I could do this for like 10 hours, but I know everyone's got things they have to do.
I also just want to say thanks to Sophia and Jonah for the opportunity, and see some good folks that I know already, like John and Jane, Barbara, Anna, Rodrigo, and other people, and say that I respect and I admire the Amazon Investor Coalition, and I hope that it continues growing, and we can work more coordinatedly through the entire Amazon to promote sustainable activities and sustainable tourism, to know how to conserve the Amazon, but also bring people and to know and visit the area, because it's really important.
Thank you, Tiago. Thank you so much for joining. I guess, Richard, go ahead if you want to jump in.
So I just want to say I thank you, and sorry I came in right at the end there, but internet held out, and that's been really nice, and it's been great hearing all of this.
It's been great to have you on the call. I know that you have the solar panel challenges in the Amazon, so total empathy and understanding for how that works out there. And thank you to all of you who were able to come and anyone who's stuck around for this conversation afterward. I feel newly energized about the work that the Amazon Investor Coalition can do in ecotourism and how we can build a united strategy for the whole region. Very excited to see where this goes next, and we'll continue to keep you all in the loop as we start to develop a bigger strategy for ecotourism development across the region and help bring more people to see the beauty of the Amazon, because anyone who's been there pretty much falls in love with it. It's such an incredible place. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye. Aki. Akira.